The spit hit my cheek. Hot, stinging even on that bitterly cold November morning. It felt thick, vile. A single glob of contempt sliding down my face, mingling with the grime and the tears I refused to let fall. I looked up from the freezing pavement, my eyes meeting his for just a fraction of a second. Pure, unadulterated disgust stared back at me from beneath perfectly groomed eyebrows. He didn't see a person. He saw garbage. An obstruction. Something to be expelled and forgotten. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, adjusted the knot of his silk tie, the fabric gleaming even in the weak morning light, and strode away, already barking into his phone again. He didn't break stride. He didn't look back. He just left me there. Marked. Humiliated. Less than human. That feeling, that absolute rock bottom. I swore I would crawl out. I swore I would never forget that face. And I never did. Which is why years later, sitting behind my own polished mahogany desk, watching that same man practically vibrate with anxiety across from me, was an experience I struggled to put into words. Marcus Thorne. His expensive suit looked rumpled now. Sweat beaded on his upper lip despite the cool air conditioning. His eyes, once filled with such lofty disdain, were now wide with desperation. Pleading. He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly, his voice trembling slightly as he begged. Begged me, Daniel Sterling, CEO of Phoenix Solutions, for a job, for a lifeline, for salvation. And the most staggering part? He had absolutely no idea who I was. Not a flicker of recognition. To him, I was just his last hope. But to me, he was the ghost of a past I had clawed my way out of. My heart pounded, a controlled storm of ice-cold fury and the slow, burning heat of vindication deferred. This was the moment. The reckoning. And he hadn't even seen it coming. Life wasn't always this high-stakes drama, sitting in a glass tower overlooking the city. Not even close. Before everything fell apart, my life was, well, pretty normal. My name's Daniel Sterling. Back then, I was just a guy in my late 20s working as a project manager at a respectable tech firm. Nothing flashy, you understand. I wasn't pulling down a fortune, but I was comfortable. I had a decent apartment downtown, a slightly temperamental car that mostly got me where I needed to go, and enough left over after bills to hang out with friends, maybe take my girlfriend, Sarah, out for dinner. I remember that feeling of quiet optimism. Like I was on the right track. The career ladder felt climbable even if I was taking it one rung at a time. I had ambitions, leading my own team, maybe contributing to something significant. My parents, good, hard-working people who lived a few hours away, were quietly proud. I was the first in the family with a degree and a corporate job, and knowing they felt I was doing well, it mattered. Sundays usually meant a phone call home, sharing small successes, reassuring them. Sarah and I were serious. We were talking about the next steps, moving in together, the whole thing. Life seemed to be unfolding in a comfortable, predictable pattern. Wake up, coffee, commute, work hard, gym or see Sarah, home, unwind, sleep, repeat. There was a rhythm to it, a sense of security I took completely for granted. I felt grounded, like my feet were planted on solid rock. I had no idea it was just sand, and the tide was already turning, silent and unseen. The first ripple wasn't a tsunami, just a tremor. Whispers of restructuring at the company. You know how it goes, vague corporate speak about synergy and optimization. Then the closed-door meetings started, the ones my name wasn't on the list for. A knot of anxiety began to form in my stomach. Layoffs followed swiftly. My department was decimated. My boss, Peterson, a guy I actually liked, called me in. He looked genuinely distraught, couldn't quite meet my eye. He mumbled the usual lines, redundancies, strategic realignment, difficult decisions. Just like that, 6 years of work, loyalty, late nights, gone. Severance was minimal. The ground beneath my feet vanished. Sarah tried. She really did at first. But the job market was brutal. Tech had hit a slump, and my solid but not stellar experience wasn't cutting it. Rejection after rejection chipped away at my confidence. My savings started draining at an alarming rate. Rent, car payments, utilities, the numbers just kept going down. The stress was immense, a constant pressure behind my eyes. I became withdrawn, snapping at little things. The easy laughter between Sarah and me disappeared, replaced by tense silences or arguments about money, about my lack of prospects. The talk of moving in together died. One evening, after another strained conversation, Tears streamed down her face as she told me she couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore. She needed stability, someone with a future. She loved me, she said, but she had to leave. The door closed quietly behind her, and the silence in the apartment was deafening. Losing the job emptied my bank account. Losing Sarah hollowed out my soul. Then the phone call that shattered everything else. My mom sobbing, barely coherent. My dad had collapsed. A massive heart attack. I dropped everything, drove the hours back home in a daze. Weeks turned into a blur of hospital waiting rooms, antiseptic smells, hushed conversations with doctors, the constant hum and beep of machines. He survived, thank God, but the recovery would be long. And the medical bills, they were staggering. Insurance covered some, but not nearly enough. I poured the last dregs of my savings into it, maxed out my credit cards, took out a small, desperate loan. Anything to help. When I finally returned to my city apartment, defeated and drained, the eviction notices were taped to the door. Bright orange warnings I couldn't ignore. No job. No savings. No girlfriend. No home. Nothing. That's how I ended up on Lexington Avenue that morning. Cold. Invisible. Just another piece of human debris on the sidewalk. And that's when he appeared. Marcus Thorne. The man in the expensive suit. Swaggering, barking into his phone, radiating impatience like a force field. He almost tripped, his polished shoes scuffing near my worn-out sneakers. He stopped. Glared. Not with annoyance. With pure, visceral disgust. Like I was a cockroach marring his perfect sidewalk. And then he spat. That single, deliberate act of contempt. The sneer on his face. The utter dismissal. He walked on without a backward glance, leaving me there with the stinging shame on my cheek and a sudden, terrifyingly cold clarity. This was the bottom. But staring after him, a spark ignited in the freezing pit of my stomach. Not just despair. Rage. A ferocious, desperate need to not just survive this, but to rise so high that no one could ever look down on me like that again. That moment on the sidewalk, it was a brutal kind of baptism. Before Thorne's spit hit my face, I was lost in a fog of failure and self-pity. I felt utterly broken. But his contempt, so raw and undisguised, it shocked me awake. He saw me as nothing less than nothing. And in that instant, watching his retreating form merge back into the oblivious, bustling crowd, a vow formed in the wreckage of my life. I wouldn't just endure this. I would fight back. I would rebuild. I would claw my way out of this pit, piece by painful piece, and I would create a life where his kind of casual cruelty couldn't touch me. More than that, a life where someone like him might one day need me. It seemed an impossible fantasy then, fueled by pure, unadulterated fury. The climb started with the smallest steps. Literally. Instead of just sitting, paralyzed by despair, I started walking. Miles each day across the city to the main public library. It offered warmth, refuge, and crucially, free internet access. I used the computers relentlessly, searching for any job, no matter how menial. Washing dishes, cleaning toilets, overnight stocking, anything that paid even a few dollars. I'd use the library restrooms or shelter facilities to clean myself up, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity, always feeling the phantom sting of Thorne's spit, the memory of his sneer pushing me onward. It was deeply humiliating, scavenging for opportunities, always feeling judged by people who hurried past, avoiding eye contact. Finally, a break. A greasy spoon diner downtown needed a dishwasher, graveyard shift. The pay was abysmal, the work was hot, wet, and endless, and the smell of stale fryer oil seemed permanently embedded in my clothes and skin. But it was income. It was a start. I hoarded every single dollar, surviving on watery coffee and leftover crust the cook sometimes slipped me. Nights were still a struggle, crowded shelters where sleep was fitful, or finding sheltered doorways when the shelters were full, the cold seeping into my bones. But now there was a flicker. A tiny pinpoint of light suggesting a way out. Months ground by like that. Saving pennies, nickels, dimes. Eventually, unbelievably, I scraped together enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a tiny room in a shared, dilapidated apartment miles away in Queens. It was barely bigger than a closet, with peeling paint and a window that overlooked an air shaft filled with trash. But it had a door. A door I could lock. After months of exposure and vulnerability, that simple lock felt like the gates to a fortress. It was mine. Having that sliver of private space, that anchor, allowed my mind to clear slightly. The library became my second home again, but now my focus shifted. My old tech skills, buried under layers of trauma and despair, began to resurface. I started devouring free online tutorials, coding, web development, database management. I used the diner's slow periods after the late-night rush, propping my phone up near the steaming dish machine, trying to absorb lectures through cheap earbuds. I sacrificed sleep, pushing myself with a grim determination. Thorne's face, his casual cruelty, became my unlikely fuel. Every function I learned, every bug I fixed in my practice code, felt like chipping away at the power he held in that memory. Occasionally I'd see his company, Thorne Industries, mentioned online, new acquisitions, soaring profits. Thorne himself quoted in business journals, sounding smug and untouchable. It was like salt in a wound, knowing he thrived while I fought for survival. But it didn't crush me. It hardened me. One day, I promised myself silently, hunched over a flickering library monitor. One day. The next few years were a relentless grind. Dishwasher to night shift data entry clerk. Data entry to a bottom-rung IT help desk job at a struggling nonprofit, thanks to demonstrating some basic troubleshooting skills. Each move was small, incremental, barely noticeable from the outside. But it was always forward. I lived like a monk, my tiny room my only luxury. Every spare cent went towards necessities or online courses. I earned certifications, rebuilt my resume, started cautiously reaching out to former colleagues. Most ignored me. The gap in my resume, the whiff of failure, it was too much for some. But Dave, a guy I used to occasionally grab lunch with at my old firm, responded. He was initially shocked, then sympathetic when I gave him the highly edited version of my time off. He didn't offer pity though. He offered practical advice. He ripped apart my outdated resume, gave me interview coaching, and eventually stuck his neck out to recommend me for a junior developer role at the tech startup where he now worked. Getting that offer, it felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. Real work, real potential, a real salary even if modest. I felt like Daniel Sterling again, not just the ghost on the sidewalk. At the startup, I burned brighter than anyone else. Not because I was inherently smarter, but because I was hungrier. Failure wasn't an abstract concept. It was the cold pavement, the smell of grease, the sting of spit. I didn't just meet deadlines, I anticipated problems. I didn't just learn the code base, I mastered it and looked for ways to improve it. I worked longer hours, volunteered for difficult projects, absorbed everything like a sponge. Within 2 years, I wasn't junior anymore. I was leading a small team, earning respect, making real contributions. The startup was growing fast, caught up in a new tech wave. And I was riding that wave, learning constantly. It was during this time that I started tinkering on the side. My own ideas, born from seeing inefficiencies everywhere. Specifically, using AI and machine learning to automate complex business workflows, something the established giants like Thorne Industries seemed slow to grasp, trapped in their legacy systems and corporate inertia. I saw an opening. I pitched my ideas internally at the startup, but the founders were cautious, risk-averse, focused on their existing roadmap. Fair enough, it was their company. But the fire in my belly, the one Thorne had inadvertently lit, roared back to life. Why wait? Why build someone else's vision when I had my own? I'd already faced the worst. What was the risk of trying, compared to the certainty of regret if I didn't? So, I did the craziest thing I'd ever done, arguably crazier than surviving homelessness. I took my carefully saved earnings, a nest egg built with fierce discipline, secured a small, terrifying business loan Dave helped co-sign, bless him, and I quit. I walked away from the safety net I'd fought so hard to regain. I founded Phoenix Solutions. The name felt right, necessary. Rising from the ashes of my old life. The first year was sheer hell. 18-hour days fueled by cheap coffee and instant noodles. Constant, gut-wrenching fear of failure. Every setback felt like it could send me spiraling back down. But this time the fear was different. It was mingled with purpose. It was my company, my dream on the line. Slowly, agonizingly, we started to gain traction. A small client here, a pilot project there. Our AI solutions were genuinely innovative, delivering results. Word started to spread. Meanwhile, news about Thorne Industries grew increasingly grim. Market share slipping. Stock price tanking. Rumors of internal chaos, of Marcus Thorne's increasingly erratic decisions. Complacency and arrogance, it seemed, were finally exacting their price. I watched, dispassionately I told myself, as his empire began to visibly crumble. The world was definitely changing. Phoenix Solutions hit its stride. Our focus on AI-driven efficiency was perfect timing. The market woke up and we were ready. We scaled rapidly, hiring bright minds, moving into sleek new offices. 5 years after launching from my cramped apartment, we weren't just a niche player, we were a force. We were winning major contracts, getting press, disrupting the very industry Thorn Industries used to dominate. Their decline became a freefall. Bad investments came to light. Key executives bailed, citing Thorn's autocratic and out-of-touch leadership. Clients canceled contracts, frustrated with outdated services and Thorn's legendary refusal to adapt. Some of those clients came directly to us, seeking the innovation Thorn Industries lacked. It felt profoundly strange to be benefiting, even indirectly, from the implosion of the company run by the man who symbolized my lowest point. Then came the day Maria, my sharp, no-nonsense COO, walked into my office. She had a particular look on her face, the one reserved for truly significant news. "Daniel," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "we've received an interesting inquiry. A potential acquisition target. They're putting out feelers looking for a lifeline. Their situation is delicate." She slid a sleek, confidential file across my desk. My eyes caught the name on the tab. Thorn Industries. The air left my lungs in a rush. My hands suddenly felt icy cold, gripping the arms of my chair. Maria, completely unaware of the personal earthquake this triggered, continued. "Financially, they're a disaster zone. Crushing debt, obsolete infrastructure, burning through cash. But," she conceded, "there are some potentially valuable legacy assets, patents maybe. And absorbing a name like Thorn Industries, it would send a massive signal to the market." She paused, noticing my silence, the color likely draining from my face. "Are you all right, Daniel?" "Thorn Industries," I repeated, the name feeling alien and yet intimately familiar on my tongue. "Led by Marcus Thorn." Maria nodded. "The very same. Word is he's personally making calls, desperate to find a buyer or a major investor before the whole thing goes under. He's facing total ruin. Desperate. Marcus Thorn. Desperate." The irony was so potent, so absolute, it almost choked me. This wasn't just business. This was the universe delivering a setup so perfect, so poetic, it felt scripted. A reckoning was at hand. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, I had to take the meeting. I had to see him. Not as Daniel Sterling, the invisible man on the sidewalk, but as Daniel Sterling, the CEO of Phoenix Solutions. The power had shifted utterly. He was walking into my world now. And he had no clue. The meeting was set for a few days later. In my office. The one high above the city, with the panoramic views and the quiet hum of success. A world away from the grimy sidewalk where our paths first crossed. The morning arrived and a strange calm settled over me. The white-hot rage from years ago had cooled, hardened into something focused, diamond-sharp. I chose a suit, expensive, yes, but understated. Power, not flash. I sat behind my desk, the surface cool and smooth beneath my fingertips, and waited. Maria's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Thorn is here." "Send him in," I replied, my own voice perfectly steady. The door opened, and there he stood. Marcus Thorn. He looked diminished. Older, thinner than I remembered, the expensive fabric of his suit somehow failing to conceal the strain underneath. The arrogance was still there, a faint residue in his posture, but it was brittle now, overlaid with a sheen of anxiety. His eyes flickered around my office, assessing the space, the view, the subtle indicators of wealth and power. A shadow, was it envy? Resentment? Crossed his face before he switched on a practiced, charming smile. He walked towards me, hand outstretched. "Mr. Sterling, is it? Daniel Sterling?" "Marcus Thorn." He spoke my name as if tasting it for the first time. "A pleasure." Impressive setup. No recognition. None at all. Why would there be? I was just another suit, another potential mark, another step in his desperate climb back from the edge. I stood, meeting his outstretched hand with a brief, firm shake. His palm was slightly damp. "Mr. Thorn, please take a seat." I indicated the plush leather chair facing my desk. The supplicant's chair. He didn't waste time. He launched straight into his pitch, a rapid-fire blend of desperation and dwindling bravado. He talked of Thorn Industries' legacy, its brand recognition, the temporary market challenges. He framed the company's collapse as a mere dip, a golden opportunity for a visionary investor, like me, to capitalize on the turnaround. His words tumbled out, laced with jargon, but the underlying panic was audible. His eyes kept darting to my face, searching for any sign of agreement, any hint that his performance was landing. I let him talk. I leaned back, my expression deliberately neutral, impassive. I interjected occasionally with sharp, precise questions about their crippling debt, their outdated tech, their fleeing talent. Questions Maria and my finance team had armed me with. Each one seemed to land like a small blow, making him flinch, stammer, regroup. He deflected, promised sweeping changes, painted rosy pictures of a future that anyone could see was pure fantasy. The longer he spoke, the more the image of the powerful tycoon dissolved, revealing the desperate man underneath, clinging to driftwood in a storm of his own making. Finally, his pitch sputtered out. He leaned forward again, his voice dropping, the false charm replaced by raw pleading. Daniel, Mr. Sterling, let me be blunt. We need this. Thorn Industries needs a partner with your vision, your resources. Phoenix Solutions, you're our only real shot at survival. And my survival. He held my gaze, his eyes begging for a lifeline. What's it going to take? Can we find a way forward? Silence stretched in the room, thick with unspoken history. I leaned forward slowly, mirroring his posture, resting my elbows on the desk. I met his desperate gaze directly. Mr. Thorne, I began, my voice quiet but carrying weight. Before we talk deals, I have something I need to ask you. He looked momentarily confused, then perhaps hopeful. A negotiation tactic? Anything, he said quickly. Anything at all. Do you happen to remember, I asked, my voice still soft, a cold morning maybe 8 or 9 years ago? On Lexington Avenue? His brow furrowed. Trying to place it. Lexington? I conducted a lot of business around there, but a specific morning. He trailed off, shaking his head slightly. Allow me to be more specific, I continued, holding his gaze, refusing to let him look away. You were on your mobile, walking briskly. You nearly tripped over a man sitting on the sidewalk. A homeless man. Still nothing. Just a growing impatience in his eyes. Why was I talking about this? And rather than simply move past, I pressed on, my voice dropping almost to a whisper. You stopped. You looked down at this man, like he was something foul you'd scraped off your shoe. And then, you spat on him. His face. It was like watching a film in slow motion. The dawning realization. The widening of his eyes. The blood draining away, leaving his skin a sickly, pale gray. His mouth opened slightly, a small, involuntary gasp. He stared at me, really saw me, for the first time since walking into the room. The expensive office faded. The successful CEO persona dissolved. He saw the ghost from the sidewalk sitting opposite him, holding all the cards. You. He whispered, the word barely audible, his voice choked with disbelief and sudden, sickening dread. Yes, Mr. Thorne. I replied, the calm in my voice a stark contrast to the turmoil surely erupting inside him. That was me. I watched the carefully constructed world of Marcus Thorne shatter. The arrogance vanished, instantly replaced by sheer, unadulterated panic. He started stammering, words tripping over themselves. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. It wasn't personal. I was under immense pressure. Please, you have to believe me. Wasn't personal? I interrupted, my voice still level, cutting through his pathetic excuses. Wasn't degrading? Wasn't utterly devoid of basic human decency? He physically recoiled with each question. He sagged back in his chair, the fight completely gone out of him, looking utterly defeated. The incoherent apologies resumed, faster now, more desperate. Please, Sterling, Daniel. My company, my legacy, my entire life, it's all riding on this. You can't hold that against me now, please? I held up a hand, silencing him gently but firmly. It's not about holding a grudge, Mr. Thorne. It's about consequences. I remember that day. I remember the cold. I remember the shame. I remember looking at your back as you walked away and making a promise to myself. A promise that I would never allow myself or anyone else to be treated like that if I could help it. That I would build something founded on different principles. I gestured vaguely around the office, encompassing everything Phoenix Solutions represented. This is the result of that promise. Built from the very ashes you consigned me to. His eyes were wide with terror. But, The deal, the company, surely business is business? Phoenix Solutions, I stated, my voice clear and final, has absolutely no interest in acquiring Thorn Industries. Nor are we interested in any form of partnership or investment. But why? He croaked, his last shred of hope evaporating. Is it purely because of that day? Primarily, it's because your company is fiscally unsound and technologically irrelevant, I replied coolly. It's a terrible business decision. A sinking ship. But yes, Mr. Thorne, let's not pretend otherwise. Even if it were the deal of the century, I would not lift a finger to save the man who spat on me when I had absolutely nothing left. Actions have consequences. These are yours. I rose from my chair and walked towards the door, opening it pointedly. My assistant will show you out. He just sat there, frozen, staring blankly ahead. The desperate pleading was gone, replaced by the hollow shock of utter ruin. Seeing him stripped bare like that, it wasn't triumph I felt. It was a quiet, profound sense of equilibrium restored. Justice served not through active revenge, but through the simple, unavoidable return of his own actions. The circle was now closed. Marcus Thorne eventually rose, unsteady on his feet, and shuffled out of my office without another word. The swaggering titan was gone, replaced by a ghost haunted by his own past. Security escorted him from the building, just another departing visitor, swallowed by the anonymity of the city he once thought he owned. The fallout was swift and brutal. Thorn Industries declared bankruptcy within weeks. Creditors circled like vultures, picking apart the carcass of his empire. Assets were liquidated for scraps. Thorne himself vanished from the public eye, buried under an avalanche of lawsuits and debt. The last whispers I heard painted a picture of a man utterly ruined, unable to find work, stripped of everything that had defined him, his wealth, his power, his arrogance. My life and Phoenix Solutions continued to ascend. We became known not just for innovation but for fostering a culture of respect, a direct counterpoint to the toxicity Thorne represented. I never gloated over his demise. Seeing him broken in my office wasn't about pleasure, it was about closure. It was the final, definitive severing of the tie that bound me to that moment of degradation on the sidewalk. It was proof, mostly to myself, that the lowest points don't have to define you, that resilience can reshape destiny. Looking back, the rage is long gone. That encounter wasn't truly about revenge in the end. It was about reclaiming my own narrative, demonstrating that dignity can be rebuilt, that strength can be forged in the fires of adversity. Thorne wasn't destroyed by me. He was destroyed by the consequences of his own character, his own hubris. I just happened to be the one sitting across the desk when the bill came due. The experience imprinted on me the fragility of fortune, the corrosive nature of arrogance, and the enduring power of basic human decency. I learned that you can rise from anything, and that the best victory isn't crushing your enemy, but building a life so strong and principled that their actions, their contempt, ultimately mean nothing. And knowing that I would never, ever treat another human being the way he treated me, that feels like the most profound win of all.